storytelling in video content. So I'm going to put this out there. How can museums and cultural organizations use storytelling to make their video content more compelling? Now, see, I'm going to start with you because, as I kind of said before, I just love the way your mind works and the way that you bring your stories to life and bring your videos to life. So I'd love to get a bit more about how you do that and then how you think cultural organizations could do that as well.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, it's something I like to think about a lot. The question of like, how do you just make it more interesting? And I think that like the visual, like that's kind of what I'm thinking of a lot lately is like the visual hook and just like really capturing people's attention by just doing something a little bit different um in a way that's like authentic to you. And so that's kind of something we really focus on a lot when we work with clients at Send It is like we don't want to go in and say, "Hey, you should act like Duolingo or like whoever," right? Because each cultural organization like has its own super unique identity and they have people in it. Like as we've seen with the Tank Museum's account, like when you're showing people who are obviously passionate about what they do it in the style that like feels authentic to them. Like that's the thing that cuts through the noise and makes the cultural organization able to like keep up with like the creators, right? Like we're like it's kind of hard to compete institution versus people going on camera in their bedroom, right? But the museums who really like incorporate that and let their just like authentic personalities of their institution like come through. I think that's really the number one thing right now that feels compelling.
I think that's quite cool because that's similar to what you do, is that like Paul? So you work at the organization, but you're also in video. So how do you go about that when you're creating your videos, and how did you even become the face of some of your channels?
So it's kind of a long story, and I know we're short on time, so I won't go into too deep. But when we originally started, we kind of started the TikTok account, and we called it Fam the Tank Man. Fam being short for my last name, and yes, that's the best we could come up with on short notice. So we just kind of stuck with it. And because this was new territory for us, so we were like, let's just give it a go, see how it, see what how it goes. And over time, the audience and the community we started building, I just kind of I was essentially the face and the voice of it. People also got to know me a bit better, I guess, on a not necessarily personal level, but in terms of like what we're talking about, the history and the content through stuff like that. And I wasn't. The thing is, it was called Fam the Tank Man, but like I was just being myself, and I think that's the key thing is just to. It sounds a bit cliche, but just be yourself. We're in a world now where there's just so much fakery and nothing's genuine, not nothing, but lots of things just aren't genuine. Just be yourself. I've always been interested in military history for as long as I can remember, from like watching like war films like Memphis Belle or Empire of the Sun, stuff like that. And for me, it just kind of comes natural. I'm just talking about stuff I'm really passionate about. We've got a really cool collection. The history itself is really, really important, and I like to think it comes across in the way I present myself in the content we make. But I think that's the thing, just be genuine.
I think what's beautiful about that is there was something you said is that the passion is there's a real passion there. It's a genuine passion, and like you said, from a cultural organization standpoint, there's so many people who work your organization, from volunteers to even to the front of desk. There's so many people who just are passionate about what they do, about what you do at your cultural organization, and finding those people, it's not always easy, but finding them and just getting started, you never know what you can build. Dean, how would you recommend people or cultural organizations to start telling more compelling stories? How could they do it?
Yeah, listen to Paul and Sierra, because that's like absolutely spot on. I think with those authentic voices that we've all got in these organizations, I was just thinking back to something that Paul was saying there about I went to an organization the other day. One of the guides who's a volunteer there knows everything there is about the building and museum, the 300 years worth of history, and he was more than happy to go on camera, but he just needed to feel like he wasn't going to be made to look silly if necessary. And that was kind of like, it was almost like the person who was filming was like, how do I direct him? And the person who was the subject was like, well, what do you want me to say? And so just be yourself, be authentic, and that will come through. And I think a lot of the content that I see that's successful with the organizations that I work with are behind the scenes, are what is the story behind it. And that story is so important that it does resonate with like real true fans. You're not just jumping on like fads and dances and so on and so forth. You're talking about what makes this particular institution, organization, whatever it is, important to you, and that will probably come across quite well on screen and make it important for them as well. So yeah, everything that Sierra and Paul were saying, I've just seen so much great examples of real stories being told with such lovely authenticity.
And what I would say as well is it's a learning process. So somebody did ask, what do you do if someone hates being on camera? I hate being on camera, and when I say, but I've had to do it because there was a reason why I tried to learn to do it. So I see my videos and I cringe when I see them, but I'm like, there's a purpose, there's a reason for me doing it. There's an ambition of what I'm trying to achieve, and the more you do it, the better you get. I remember trying to shoot videos with Dean when I used to work with him, and Dean used to give me teleprompters, and I would read them for the love no money. I'd be like trying to read.
Hayden, it's your name. It's your name.
I really struggled to deal with it. Yeah. Now I use teleprompters all the time, but I had to get used to it, and you have to get used to seeing them and reading them and find out what speed works for you. And it's a process, and you shouldn't be scared of that process of just getting on with it and learning to do it. It's not going to feel comfortable the first time you do it, but nothing that's worth doing really does feel comfortable when you first do it. So you just have to kind of keep on trying, and incrementally it gets better and it gets better. So next question is, what are some common mistakes cultural organizations make when you see them telling stories through videos?
I think, one of the most common things to do is to like jump on trends. And to be fair, I'm guilty of doing that in the past as well. But sometimes like people or organizations might just jump on it just for the sake of it, rather than actually thinking, are we actually being able to tell a story or talk about our collection whilst doing this trend at the same time, rather than just for the sake of doing a trend.
No, I second that. Yes,
and not only that, I feel like sometimes there can be a negative of that, because at the end of the day, you might bring in like maybe some audiences and that might not know about you, but if everything else you do isn't really like that, then you're probably just going to lose them straight away. So you kind of need to be sort of consistent, I guess, in how you're coming across if you are going to do trends. Earlier on, especially last year, I hopped on a lot of trends on TikTok for the Tank Museum account, but most of what was going out was to do with either our collection or still giving a bit of information or telling like a story, even if it's in like the description and stuff like that. So
I think that's a great point. But how you use all elements of a post when you're posting, not just the video itself, but the caption. What stories are you telling within the captions? I think that is a really good point, because there is a lot of space there where people will learn and pick up nuance about what you're trying to get across as well. I think that's brilliant.
I was going to say, I kind of think sometimes organizations or channels, should we say, really, because sometimes they're individuals, but they don't really know who their audience is. They don't have an understanding of what their habits are, because maybe they're starting out and they don't have that information yet. I always thought trying to create a persona. Who am I targeting this to? Who's the person I'm likely to be? What's their habits? Will they like this video if it's going to be like a long, slow burn? Or are they more interested in sort of like get the information as quickly as possible and kind of hit the ground running? So sometimes the edit's too long for that kind of person and their demographic, and sometimes people are just happy to sit there and watch something on their TV late at night, 40 minutes long, like a Tank Museum video, like something where it's like a restoration project that can't be really shown in 30 seconds on a short, will sit perfectly on a TV. Everyone's gone to bed, and as in most cases, the middle-aged white man is sitting there watching a Tank Museum video. So I think it's just a kind of like that good idea of knowing your audience a little bit and just trying to not try and drag the content out too long. Just get to the bit you need to.
I think one of my main bugbears is sometimes cultural organizations don't create content or videos that are for the platform. So they'll just take another video they've already got, and they'll just try and repurpose it on Instagram and then repurpose it on YouTube, but without really thinking about the features of the platform or how the platform works or how they can get the best video. So for example, like with these videos, so what I will probably do with this webinar is I'll cut it up and I'll take different segments depending on where I want to put it. So I'll take a little segment from this and put it on YouTube. I'll put the full thing on YouTube, but then I might take a smaller clip that I can put on Instagram and make it into a reel where there's just maybe just one of you on the screen, for example. So I think there's thinking about how we actually really optimize our content to work for the platform we're trying to use it for will really make a lot of difference when you're trying to get out, especially if you're trying to build audiences or trying to get a platform to push your content further as well, sort of thing. All right, so creating engaging video. So how important are hooks in video content? And what are some examples of strong hooks? What are some examples of strong hooks that we see out of there? So I know, Paul, you make a lot of short form videos. How important are hooks for you guys when you're creating your content?
Well, as someone who makes short form content and also has ADHD, so has a very short attention span at times, literally you need to grab the attention literally within the first like 2 or 3 seconds. If you don't, then the rest of that 30-second video or whatever is just completely pointless. So especially in more recent months, I'm trying to experiment with more with like really sort of strong hooks. So there's one video I did about a tank that was used in a nuclear test many years ago to see whether or not it could survive a nuclear blast. And we don't have the exact tank at the museum, but we do have the same model of tank. So I open with the video with, this tank survived a nuclear blast. And then very quickly, okay, not quite this one, but, and just go from there. Another one that works really well was a video I posted this Sunday, so 4 or 5 days ago, about a tank called the Centurion target tank, which was the whole point was to drive it on the firing range, and your mates would basically shoot at it with missiles. There'd be no warheads, but the opening was, have you ever wondered what it's like to be shot at whilst inside a tank? Well, the guys who drove this got a pretty good idea. And it's just that sort of hook that makes you think, what on earth? Why is this even a thing? And even if you're not even interested in like tanks or military history, I feel like a hook like that is going to at least get you curious, at least just to listen to a few more seconds. And I think that's all it really is. In terms of
line. What you said there about how do you get people curious? I think that's exactly what Paul showed. Like, how do you get people curious to continue to watch this video in that open moment? Because hooks can be many things. Hooks can be like big opening sentences and wording. Hooks can be visuals. They can be hooks can be text. But it's thinking about what are those key things that are going to make someone say, I want to watch this. Again, see, I think you're really good at doing stuff like that. So how do you just go about doing it?
Thank you. Yeah, I think thinking visually, like I think when I'm picturing someone on the other side of a platform, whether it's Instagram or LinkedIn or wherever, I'm imagining they're starting watching the video without any sound. And so it's like you want to make sure, like, captions is such a classic, like it's been an example for so long, but like it's taken a long time for a lot of institutions to kind of like really get serious about that. And so making sure that like it's really watchable without sound even being on. And I agree, like you want to have something that like pulls them in, piques curiosity. But yeah, just showing something kind of weird, kind of bizarre, where someone's like, what is that? What's happening? Like it can be like a little bit abstract or like, I think, yeah, just piquing interest visually, like however you can. I think, yeah, and museums, cultural places like have so many like just visually weird things, like, and you're able to kind of like build a story, like starting with that. So
no, I love that. Dean, I see you nodding away. Do you agree?
Yeah, I'm like everything that like Paul and Sierra were saying about like the posing a question at the start of the video, like big bold text. Obviously most of us watched with the sound off to at least start with, so having that sort of big bold text and sort of, we're just talking about short form here, but I still think long form, you need to almost have that kind of like eureka moment shown at the beginning, because people have clicked on the video based on the thumbnail and the title, and then if you go off piste a little bit in that first sort of, even if it's long form video for a few seconds or so, they're just going to go, no, not interested, and move on. So you almost have to reaffirm, this is what this video is about. You're in safe hands. Come along, enjoy it. So whether it's short form or long form, I still think it's important to almost sort of hit the ground running and open with a question and spark that curiosity. So I'm getting so much from this. It's brilliant.
I think that's actually that's a really good point about long form video, because there is, I do believe there's going to be. It's clear there is a transition. Short form is now becoming 3 minutes ish. So short form is now anything from 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds to up to 3 minutes at this point. So if you're making 3 minute videos, for example, like Dean said, and how are you making sure you're keeping people interested enough to make it from the beginning to the end of that 3 minutes? And then if you're gonna then push them onto a longer form video, what's the interest? What's gonna pique them? What's gonna keep them interested? What's gonna make them want to watch it all the way to the end, which is a feat in itself. So no, I love that. Okay, so we've talked about kind of what the hooks can look like and how can they use captions, transitions, and kind of visual elements, something that we've kind of talked about recently. So I know, for example, for me, I use my mobile phone. So I'll be honest with you, this is what I film everything on. I remember Dean once told me that this is more powerful than what they used to make the first Star Wars. So, so from when you think of it from that side,
you actually quote me on that, mate. I'm not actually sure it's strictly true. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Let's true. If that is true, but just to say that, to say in terms of there's so much you can do with just this.
Yeah.
And yes, you can graduate to film to cameras and stuff like that, but there's so much you can do with just that. And if you're going to use things like that, captions are really important. You can get really creative with captions nowadays, and platforms like CapCut will have a million different variations of different captions you can use. And once you've got your captions created, you should be thinking about, okay, are there any keywords you want to bring out? Are there any stories you want to kind of emphasize by using different captions on those particular words and stuff like that? And that's something that I know I try to do quite a lot of. What about you guys? How do you see the use of captions and transitions and stuff like that when you're trying to create content that's interesting?
I'll say another tool, because I also use my phone to film everything. Like, worked at a film studio, learned how to use these like fancy cameras, but it's like, for me, I feel like it can just get like, it can bog you down if you're trying to like make progress, or like, I need to like make this story happen. And sometimes it's kind of timely, right? You're like, I just need to get this out. That it's like the more equipment you add to it, you're just going to like, it's so easy to lose momentum, I feel like, in the production process. And that could be different if you have a whole planned production, like you're gonna make it really high quality, you're making it for the TV for 30 minutes, like that. I think, yeah, maybe you can take the time and like upgrade things. But I do think so much content can be used with the phone, and like that shouldn't slow anyone down, getting like a fancy setup.
No, I agree. Paul, any takes? And do you guys use like transitions and stuff like that, or how do you guys do your videos and stuff?
So yeah, we do make use of transitions both in short form and in long form. More so recently because we've been trying to we basically are like rethinking the entire way we make videos, long form. So we're using a lot more creative shots and angles and stuff like that now. But yeah, transitions. Yeah, I mean, you might as well use them. It's a tool that you have there in front of you. And not only that, you can be really, really creative with it as well. There's one short video I did last year, and I always jokingly say it's like the best transition I've ever done in like any video I've made, where we've got a tank in our collection called the Covenanter, and it's got like a interesting weird history. And I've got this really nice sort of panning like side shot of it. And then with a click like that, it transitions to footage of that tank at the exact same angle as it's speeding down like this hill, like jumping about. Really, really, really cool. I wish I could show it right now.
People don't appreciate that shot, right? That's the thing. It's like you've worked so hard on that, and like some people just gone, whereas there'll be us going, oh, bravo, bravo.
We'll appreciate
it's stuff like that. And to be fair, I think what made it a bit more satisfying is that a lot of people in the comments were also saying like that's just such a good transition.
Oh, fair enough.
But you got to be creative. And again, even with like long form, we've got a video we're currently working on, which is meant to go out, I think tomorrow maybe, where beginning of the video we've got a presenter like walking past several tanks, but we've made it look like that the transition goes from one tank to another as if he's just walking by all of them. I'm not very good at describing it, to be fair, but it looks really, really cool. It's just got to be creative.
And one thing I like to pull out from that is, like you said, it's the creativity that will keep people interested as well. So when we're correct, it's not the fact that we're just doing transitions for transition's sake. Like we said, people unfortunately lose interest really quickly. So it's about thinking about how you can keep them captured and keep them engaged in your video in a way that just sends a spike of dopamine, an extra spike of dopamine to them when they're watching that piece of content, which I think is really cool. We've got one question in the comments real quickly. Any thoughts about growing your YouTube channel using mid and long form videos? Nick said it's coming out next week. Okay.
Fact checked.
Growing YouTube channels. Dean, I know you're quite good at that. Any thoughts on YouTube channels?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a case of like when you think of like how your video is structured, I kind of tend to go down the route of, so say for instance, it's talking about a say you're in a museum, it's an artifact of one way or another. So start off with the question, what was this for? Maybe a little bit of background history, and then the sort of you're trying to get people to that end of that video as much as possible. You won't know what your audience's behavior is like until you've got a few videos under your belt and you can see how many views and where they cut off. And through like trial and error, you can start seeing, well, at the moment, I think our audience's appetite for, say, a 7-minute video is a bit too much. Maybe we need to shorten it a bit, because you want to really get over that 50% sort of mark and start to sort of eat into that final bit. You want to keep them there as long as possible. So it's the structured video. I still think, like, no matter how much tags, thumbnails, and all that, like, it has to be entertaining. It has to have that. So you know, throw the kitchen sink at it. You know, if you're trying to bring people from present day into the past, so say you're talking about the battlefield, and if you can have the background collapse down and you know, like for a transition, and you're there, you're drawn into it. Those sort of transitions help aid the story, not just there for sort of like for the sake of it. Oh, I'll try that one next. You know, they are there for a reason. So sort of understanding what your audience is prepared to watch and how long they can go for. And with YouTube, obviously, you get the benefit of actually seeing the exact point that they switch off, and you'll start seeing a pattern. So you can start thinking, what is it about 5 minutes and 50 seconds that they all turn off? And you can click on it and go, it's because the edit wasn't quick enough. We hung too long, and it's a few seconds where you just don't quite get to the next bit. So you've got to keep evolving your sort of like your ability to sort of understand what your audience is prepared to see. But it all comes down to getting them through the door with the thumbnail and the description, and then the content has got to deliver. And that is something that we could talk about all day long. But until you understand what your audience is prepared to do, then you've got to kind of like put the effort in. You've got to learn how to read what they're after.
I think that's a great point again, because what you're talking about is basically you have to understand your insights, you have to understand what YouTube is telling you and what YouTube Studio is telling you in terms of how people are engaging with your content. And like you said, and like with anything, and this is one, especially with YouTube, a lot of it is trial and error, and you just have to be able to be willing to put in that first kind of slog is a lot. It's a lot of work. Trying to get the momentum going, but once you get the momentum going, it's a bit more. It makes it a little bit more easier, but there's still a lot of work. And I always believe that YouTube is the most rewarding platform, but maybe the hardest to build from scratch. Because you can't fake it on YouTube. you have to put in the content, you have to put in the work. And like even what Paul was saying, now they've got shorts. The shorts are delivering a lot of views to people's channels and driving and bigger audiences. So how are you making use of shorts? How are you making sure that your short stories connect to your long form stories? How are you kind of driving one to each other? How are you making sure you're creating the right playlist? All of those kind of things, so that you can tell YouTube what it is you're trying to achieve with your content. So going back to my questions, which kind of goes in quite nicely with this actually. Similar to what Dean just said, what would you say your top 3 tips are for keeping audiences watching a video to the end of a video? Go. Yeah, go.
I'm desperate to hear you, Paul.
It's, to be fair, it's kind of similar to what we were saying about transitions, not just like visually, but also in terms of like story or what it is, the content that you're talking about. One thing that we kind of realized when we were looking back at some of our older long form videos is like, how soon do we switch off, even if it's like relatively early into the video? And sometimes like an intro might go on for a bit too long, and at that point you've lost them. It is just about keeping that momentum. It's literally transitions, keeping the momentum, and it's literally a bit of everything. Like, don't even have one shot for too long. In my mind, I try not to have any single shot longer than 6 seconds, unless there's something going on visually that makes it worth keeping for longer. And it's just stuff like that. Like, psychologically, like, people will pay more attention if there's just sort of more going on visually. But if you can also accompany that with audio and everything else, you know, you're more likely to keep people for as long as possible. So
I love
yeah.
that.
A couple of things I like to do to like test that out is I'll show, I have 12-year-old members in my family. I'll show them something, and I think I heard some YouTubers say they do this like to see where they like stop really caring, and like they look away. I'm like, okay, if I can't keep their attention, like, then the average like social media user, probably not, right? And they have like good feedback where you can kind of like, I can get outside my own little box of ideas for like how to shake things up. Because like when you're working on a video for a while, you might know like, oh, this part gets a little boring. I should probably like do something about it, or hopefully you thought about it like in the planning stages, but it can happen at any point. But like it's easy to just kind of get caught up in like the same tricks you normally do. So just like getting different perspectives, like same with like our team, we do the same thing where you're just like going back and forth, like, where is this boring? Try it like watching it on your phone without sound on. Again, same test. So I think those are like some like tangible things you could maybe try out.
I love that what you said about the different ways people can try to see, like, look in the video without sound. I think that's a really good idea. But there's something else you said that I really want to pick on, was the planning stage of a video. So how does that work for you? So when you're planning your video, how important is that for content you're creating?
I think for the longer form, the more important it becomes. I don't know if you would agree with that. Like, I think, yeah, when you have so much dialogue that you're going to cover, then like as much as you can like think about the visuals ahead of time, like as you can, I think is like so important. Because otherwise, like if you say all this stuff and you're like, oh, we actually don't have visuals to match it, then you're gonna like have something kind of boring. And so I think that's like a main thing to think about. I'm curious what you guys all think.
No, the planning stage for me is because, like, I don't even make look videos that long, but just from the short videos I started to make, from planning, it has made them better. It is more time consuming. Definitely, it's definitely more time consuming to make them. But from the planning, for me, I can see the improvement of what my videos look like because of the fact, okay, when I write the script now, I'm thinking, okay, I want to kind of highlight that word, or if there's something happening in the video, okay, I want to get a visual for that. So you start to kind of think about that a bit more, and I just feel like it really raises the quality of the video. Anybody else? Yeah.
I'm kind of a bit of an outlier here because I feel like if you plan too much, I feel like, me personally, you guys, brilliant work. But me personally, when I used to do commercials, it was obviously storyboarded and stuff like that, and you had to stick to it. And I found it just sucked out all creativity from the thing because you're basically going by a storyboard artist's impression. Then when it started being more user-generated content and you were able to think on your feet a little bit, you know, like you'd see, like, I'd film something in a beautiful location, I think that looks amazing there. That wasn't in the script, but I'm going to get that. And if you're telling a story, it needs to be concise and it needs to be, in a way that you're sort of, if you're talking about history, or if you're talking about like business and enterprise and whatever it may be, you need to sort of structure it out. But I suppose I like the danger of it not going well. The amount of times I've tried to plan it and I've fallen out of love with it before I've even pressed record on the camera. Whereas I wouldn't have had that. I'd have been like knee deep in it, filming it and going, I've got to make this work now. And I quite like that sort of like spontaneity with it. So, but for God's sake, anybody else, do not take that as the way.
I think what that shows, but I think someone like you, Dean, you're the sort of person who because you've got so much experience, you can break it. You know, that kind of way. You have to be able to.
I feel like I have to break it to feel like I've made it. You know.
Yeah. So whereas I think, like, if you're new to filming or new to creating content, that plan will help you just get some structure. And then once you've got to a stage where you are, like you said, like Dean's been doing this for years at this point, on all scales, you can see something and be like, no, this is going to work, because you understand how content creation. And I think that's a really good point, that you still want to have the creative freedom to do something, but have a structure to keep it moving as well at the same time.
Mm-hmm. You need to know where it's going, what is going to happen at the end, and what you want to look like. Whether that's somebody else's example and you think, I want it to look just like that, but in my own, but tell my own story, then what it takes to reverse engineer and get that sometimes works as well for me. But yeah,
which leads quite nicely to our last few questions. So now I want to look at basic editing tips. So what are some really basic things that people can do if you're new to creating videos or new to creating content? What are some simpler things that you think make videos work a lot better? Just if you can't do anything else, make sure you've got great sound. If you can't do it, like, what are those things for you guys?
So, like, I think if you're using your phone, right, that's got to be the easiest way of getting into it. Most phones, whilst the lenses are small, the software behind them are much more advanced than most cinema cameras. So, and they take a lot to get your head around when you're first starting. So you got your phone, you know how to use it. I would get some sort of cheap microphone, because whilst we can all accept really dodgy looking video, the sound quality is ultimately important. So I know Sierra has a little Rode microphone that she talks into when she does her videos. And she's got around here somewhere. And that works just as, that's great. I'd plug straight into the phone and off you go. And you can interview people on the fly. You can clip it onto somebody. You can even do a walk and talk yourself. And then probably something to just hold the phone in, like a little plastic cage. You get them off of Amazon for like £15, £20, like that. And all that does is that just means that you're not holding the phone like you would do normally. You've got a bit more purchase on there. If you want to put it down on the table, it's easy to do so. And it just gives you a bit more flexibility. So probably for like £50, £60 or dollars, $100 maybe, you could end up with like all you need to get yourself started. And then I'd edit on something as simple as CapCut. You can download it for free. You could do DaVinci, but at the end of the day, you want to be using the software that everybody else is using to create social media content, with all the transitions and the music and the effects. And the best of all is you can reframe it, put it into different ratios, so you can have square for LinkedIn and vertical and so on and so forth. So it gives you so much more to play with. And there's a free version. And for people who don't want to be sitting there pinching on the phone, there's a desktop version as well. So you can offload your footage onto your desktop. You can edit onto on CapCut, and then you can also do auto captions as well, which makes life a lot easier. So like the barrier, I don't want to sound like an old man here, but I was using massive cameras with massive batteries that weighed a ton, that gave pleasing results in certain lighting conditions, editing on a computer system which was unforgivable, and then you'd have to then type out the captions yourself, and you're just like, what the hell? And now people can do it on the train ride home.
I love that. Anybody else got any tips for just how to create videos, or one thing you think are musts if you're going to do a video and you're new to it?
I'll add to that. It kind of just sort of similar to what Dean and Sierra said, but yeah, you don't. I would actually say avoid big expensive cameras. It can be really easy to think, oh, I'm going to start making content. I'm going to invest loads of money in like a Sony A7 or blah, 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 blah. Just don't. Literally, for a fraction of that cost, get yourself a phone. I use a Samsung S21 Ultra. This phone is like 4 or 5 years old now. That's what I asked for the museum, because that's what I was going to be doing all my work on, all the filming. You've got 5 cameras in that, including a selfie camera. It's perfect for everything we need. Even when shooting stuff like outdoors, it's got a ×20 telephoto lens that when you look at footage on it, it looks like it's been filmed from like a studio quality camera. And again, in terms of like audio is really important. You can invest in like fairly cheap microphones. I got at one point I got a microphone by a company called Purple Panda, and then eventually I wanted a wireless one, so I invested some money into DJI mics. So I've got I've got some here, bit of a show and tell. So we also use these at work. The DJI Mic 2s. Use the mic ones at work, but they're really, really good, especially if you use other DJI equipment. I have a DJI action camera, so I link the microphone directly to the action camera, and I don't need any cables, which is perfect. Because in my own personal life, I make content out on my motorbike, and the last thing I want is wires everywhere. So stuff like that. It's good to invest money into the kit, but it's worth keeping in mind you don't really have to spend that much to make like good quality videos. And especially with CapCut, I say I swear by it. It's not perfect, but I've used it for years. I use it in my own free time, and I've used it for the museum for nearly 3 years now, and it just is fantastic. And as Dean said with auto captions, but before I got the pro version of it, there is a paywall for certain features, but I was like, oh, let me just use this in my own free time for my own personal content, make some captions myself. And it just takes ages. You know, you pay for pro, tap auto captions. It's made like captions over 4 or 5 minutes in a video, and it's taken like 3 seconds. It's worth investing in, I would say.
I agree. Ciara?
Yeah, I've been saying I need to use CapCut. I need to try and learn how to use it for years, literally, like for like 5 years. But I just like I'm a creature of habit where Adobe Premiere.
Oh my God, really?
I don't know. It has a chokehold on me. I wish I didn't have that. I wish I could get over this. But yeah, I don't go around saying use Adobe, edit your videos.
We have no issue with Adobe. If you want to,
but I wish I would take the time, and maybe I will. Maybe I'll have this challenge because I think it's so powerful being able to do it on the go. Like that really is like I have to go to my laptop, transfer files. Like if you're trying to get something out quick, like keep that creative momentum, all those things. Like being able to do everything on a phone, I think is super handy. I also want to plug. I feel like that I might get hate for this, but Canva. I think
Canva video. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some really like ever since they let you like remove background from images, like they have just had my heart. And they like you can get so many sound effects and you can get free music and like really cool visual templates. Like there's so many out there. And I just think that's like a fun way to just like, I don't know, add another layer of creativity to videos.
I think that's a brilliant point because so when I use CapCut, but I tend to make my videos using CapCut and Canva. So I'll take templates from Canva, or I'll make some of my stills or the transition images. I'll create them on Canva and then I'll drop them in CapCut. So I definitely use both programs, and I do think there's a lot to be said about understanding how to use Canva and CapCut as almost like as a dual programming sort of thing. That's really good. What's one common video editing mistake that museums and cultural organizations should avoid?
One that I'll mention, and I don't know if it's technically might be controversial or not, but one thing that I really find irritating, and I'm sorry if anyone does this, is when you film something in landscape and you crop in for something portrait. It really irritates me because in my opinion, the composition doesn't always look quite right, or something might always be slightly cut off. If you're gonna film something that you know is going to go out on social media, or if it's going to be short form, or if it's going to be in the 9:16 portrait, just filming it. Everything will look so much better. I've tried arguing with some of the team saying, "Oh, we should get a drone that can shoot in portrait as well because it'd be really good." But not quite convinced. But I think it's really quite. I feel like it's also can be obvious as well if you filmed in landscape and you're cropping it in because things just don't look quite right.
That's a great one.
Pet peeve. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah.
I think another one as well is like understanding your use of space on social platforms. So understanding where there's going to be text on the social platform itself. So like when you put a reel on it, they'll have the likes and the description a little bit at the bottom. And so what's the actual space that you can use that all of your audience are going to see? Like, and really have an understanding of that and making sure that you're putting things centralized will really help your content so people can actually see it and understand it as well.
Yeah, just to pick up on that, Hayden, is like if you're thinking like if a rule of thirds vertically, and you position the subject in 2/3, leaving a third gap at the very top, then that gives you room to put on that question, like, did you know that this tank was used for XYZ and so? You can start it off like that. Whereas when you perfectly frame them in that sort of portrait, then you've got nowhere to go and you're just going to go slap bang over their sort of head. So sometimes you can add the captions above the head and stuff like that. So my other pet peeve is like when somebody like puts a filter. We call it grading, right? But they put a filter over it and they max it right to the end, and you're like, it looks like vomit. Stop it. You can't watch it. It's impossible. So that's one of the other things that sort of like is my pet peeve.